Hi, my name is Shelley Downey, and this is the case comparison of the 1994 Colorado South Canyon wildfire, also known as Storm King Mountain, and the 2013 Arizona Yarnell Hill Fire. Every day, our world faces a variety of threats. These threats include natural disasters such as tsunamis and earthquakes, to man-made threats such as bombings, shootings, and the insider threat. These threats have all continued to test the communication, emergency management of governments, institutions, and private sectors. Some agencies have been successful in addressing these threats, however, others have failed, which puts into question the leadership and accountability of these agencies. There are three essential requirements for managing your way out of a natural storm: a leader, a strategic platform for decision making, and a means to communicate. Leadership determines success or failure of emergency response. Emergency management is a process used to prepare and respond to a crisis. It is the strategic organizational management process used to anticipate, respond, and mitigate a crisis in order to protect critical assets of an organization from hazards that can have catastrophic results. This leads us into the four most important questions you should ask following a catastrophic event. What did you know? When did you know it? What did you do about it? And what are you going to do to ensure that it never happens again? Before I get into the Storm King Mountain Fire and the Yarnell Hill Fire, I wanted to give you some background on what wildland firefighters do. Wildland firefighters consist of ground impounders, hot shots, engine crew, heli-tac, smoke jumpers, air tanker and helicopter pilots, and support personnel, dozer operators, and water tender operators. There are also those who keep records and manage operations and planning, logistics and finance, those who oversee safety, critically assess risk at systems and incident level, provide information to the public, and also incident commanders. Though all of their roles are diverse, they're also unified at the same time. They are an interagency firefighting force of federal, state, and local wildland firefighters from the private sector and also volunteers. Together, they are all called up by the nation to fill all risk roles dealing with hurricanes, earthquakes, to even potential terrorist attacks, in addition to their regular firefighting. As the population grows, many communities are expanding into the fire-prone interface. While their specialized training and mission are primarily wildfire, some wildland firefighters fill more traditional structure firefighting roles as well, as they increasingly respond to requests for assistance on vehicle accidents and structure fires. Storm King Mountain sits in the White River National Forest, which is on land that is administered by the U.S. Bureau of Land Management Grand District. It sits about 2 miles from a major Interstate 70 and 7 miles of Glenwood Springs, which has a population of about 7,000. On July 2, 1994, lightning ignited a fire west of Glenwood Springs, Colorado during a summer drought of record high temperatures and low humidity. Fire danger indices were the highest recorded ever in 21 years. Initially, the fire began on a ridge paralleled by two deep canyons and was thought to have little probability of spreading. However, dry lightning storms ignited 40 new fires in the BLM's Grand Junction district, and in the 2 days prior to when the South Canyon fire had started, which required the district to set its priorities on the initial fires. There are many issues that Storm King Mountain faced. BLM firefighter Bletch Blanco requested for an air tanker, but was told that there were 18 requests in front of his. There were also requests for helicopters, but none were available. Later on during the firefight, there were specific requests made for additional firefighters and also specific crew members, such as Type 2 crews, which are the second highest in firefight capability, and once again for additional helicopters, but none were available, or they were denied. During this time, there was about 54 personnel working the fire: 16 smoke jumpers, 20 hotshot crew members, 6 heli-tac personnel, and 12 firefighters from the BLM and Forest Service. During this time, equipment was also failing. Firefighters during this time were responding with chainsaws to cut down branches and had to leave the scene in order to turn around and go back to base in order to repair their chainsaws. Poor communication and delays were experienced all throughout this firefight. Half of the Prineville Hotshots team and fellow firefighters arrived after significant delay due to the confusion at the staging base. Now, at this time, there's about several different fire departments responding to this fire to all help one another. So we have different fire departments with given different direction and what to do. So that led to a lot of confusion regarding communication. Pilots that were able to respond had to keep switching from shuttle missions to buckets to cargo. Radio contact during this time was also infrequent. In fact, Anthony Petrilli, one of the smoke jumpers, stated that he did not hear BLM firefighter Blanco on the radio very much and that there was a lot of other radio traffic. A dry cold front began to move into the fire area and winds began to increase significantly. Fire was observed back across the drainage beneath the firefighters and moved onto a dense and highly flammable Gamble oak. As a result, 12 firefighters and 2 Helitack crew members died as they could not outrun the flames. After the fire on July 7, 1994, the interagency team met to investigate. This team consisted of 5 interagency fire managers and personnel. Instructions and assignments were given to these members. 70 interviews were conducted, and the team also met 1 to 2 times a day to discuss all the data gathered. Investigation team revealed that the cause of the fire was a combination of multiple things, such as fire behavior, incident management, involved personnel profiles, and equipment. Reburn from the Gamble oak was also not recognized. Fire behavior from previous days could have been predicted based on topography, fuels, and weather. However, this information was not requested nor provided for personnel. The wind turbulence, intensity, and rapid movement of the fire exceeded the limitations of the firefighters' protective equipment and also prevented effective deployment of the fire shelters. In regards to incident management, escape routes and safety zones were deemed inadequate for the burning conditions that occurred. The construction and certain fire lines were hazardous, and most of the guidelines of the Fire Line Handbook, PMS 410-01, were not carried out. Moving to the Yarnell Hill Fire, which was similar in aspects to the Storm King Mountain Fire. On June 28, 2013, a fire began on a high ridge west of Yarnell, Arizona, when lightning ignited several fires. The fire began on a steep terrain with no vehicle access and was thought to be of minimal activity and spread potential. However, the fire grew the next day as winds began to increase and resources were then called in. Type 2 Incident Management Team, IMT, assumed command, and the Granite Mountain Interagency Hotshot Crew, IHC, superintendent assumed the role of the Division Alpha Supervisor, and a Type 2 IMT assumed command. The fire had spread northeast, but as the wind began to shift, the fire started to move towards Yarnell. The Granite IHC remained on the ridge southwest of the fire and were in the black. The black is considered an area that has already been burned and is most times considered a safer area to be in. Personnel who were in communication with the IHC crew knew that they were in the black and assumed that they would stay there. However, the crew had actually left and ended up heading southeast through mostly unburned brush to another safety zone by Boulder Springs Ranch. As the thunderstorm reached the fire, winds began to increase significantly and shifted the fire south towards the IHC crew members. The IHC reported that they were entrapped and that they were deploying their fire shelters. There was a gap of over 30 minutes in information available for the IHC, and the team could not verify communications from the crew. No one knew where these crew members were, and even the air tankers above could not locate the crew. Not much is known about the crew's decision and why they decided to move out of the burn area, the black area, and why they decided to leave that safety zone. During this Yarnell Hill fire, there was multiple issues, some of which were similar to Storm King Mountain. For example, communication, again, was very difficult throughout the incident, and some firefighters were not programmed with the necessary tone guards. It was reported that crews were forced to fix the problem and developed workarounds in order to effectively transmit their radio communication. And also, radio traffic was heavy during this time as well. No one understood the IHC's intentions, movements, and location once they left the black. It is believed that it is a result of informal and vague radio communication. Now, these Granite Mountain IHC crew members were fully qualified and trained operational hotshot crew members. They knew what they were doing, so it's very confusing to see how such a qualified team made such a what it seemed to be an irrational decision to move out of a safety zone. The fire itself was increasingly complex over a very short amount of time, and even aerial attacks were implemented, but the fire was so busy with lead plane duties that it affected the ability for the aerial attacks to fulfill all of their responsibilities. And some of these aircrafts were also unavailable due to weather conditions. After the fire, the state of Arizona assembled a serious accident investigation team to review and report the conditions leading to the entrapment of the Granite Mountain IHC. The team drew from their own knowledge of wildfire operations and culture and utilized data, resources, and methods to recreate the events. Yarnell Hill had not experienced a wildfire in over 45 years, which made it a prime area for wildfire because of the extreme drought, cured grass, and chaparral. Fire management endured various transitions from Type 4 to Type 1 incidents in less than 20 hours. Retired U.S. Forest Service firefighter Roy Hall was the incident commander at the time of the Yarnell Hill fire, stated that there's nothing we could have done differently that would have necessarily changed the outcome. Hall also rejected the idea that the fatalities could have been blamed on unanticipated fire behavior as training plans for managing the unexpected. Yarnell Hill had been in discussion since the 1970s because the area was so flammable and dangerous. The Arizona Division of Occupational Safety and Health, ADOSH, cited the Arizona Forestry Division and fined them $559,000, which included $25,000 for each deceased hotshots family. ADOSH stated that the division prioritized protection of non-defensible structures and pasture land over fire safety, and that supervisors knew the suppression of active chaparral fuels was ineffective, and wind would push the fire towards non-defensible structures. Firefighters working downwind weren't promptly removed. Hotshots weren't given maps or aerial diagrams when they reported for duty, and safety officers were not available. The Granite Mountain hotshots bodies were moved off-site within 24 hours. Deputies rushed the investigation and weren't even qualified to do the investigations because they weren't wildfire scene investigators. The community began to get uncomfortable, as well as the families of the firefighters who passed away. They were uncomfortable with the investigation because certain things weren't able to be studied from this, such as the exact positions of the bodies, the deployed fire shelters, or the conditions of the tools used by the firefighters, or maybe even the tracking steps and the movement of the firefighters. All of these things could have been lessons to be learned to avoid similar tragedies in the future. The magnitude and speed of the fires at Storm King Mountain and Yarnell Hill were both underestimated. Lack of effective communication and appropriate tools combined with poor implementation of proper policies and procedures contributed immensely to these tragic events. Effective leadership, emergency management, strategic planning, and communication are crucial to addressing any type of threat, and each one of these things ultimately affects the other, like a domino effect. Without these things, personnel are unable to perform their duties to the best of their ability.